Hi everyone, I'm sitting with Ben and Anna Kenna in Terang in Western Victoria. Ben and Anna, the reason I'm interviewing you, you won't be comfortable with, but I like interviewing highly profitable, highly skilled dairy farmers. Tell us a little bit about your history in the dairy industry.
Yeah, well, I first started farming about 23 years ago when I left school after year 11. Spent about 4 or 5 years on my dad's farm working on 2 of his farms, and then a bit of transition over to Anna's parents' farm after that, and managed for about 4 years there, and then we started share farming. That took place for about 6 or 7 years, and then we got ourselves in a position to purchase the farm about 5 years ago.
Okay, so you've got reasonably substantial debt.
Yeah, we've wiped off significant debt in the last 3 or 4 years, but we started at a very low equity base.
Right. Anna, just a matter of interest, why did you agree to be interviewed? Because you're actually quite modest people. I mean, I know you've been focus farmers in the past, but when I rang and said, look, can we do the interview, why did you say yes?
Well, I suppose there's a lot of negativity around the dairy industry, and we just want to get the message out there that you can be successful, you can be profitable, and we're happy to share our journey and what we've learnt with others so that they can hopefully go on a similar journey.
Terrific. Now, are you quite happy that if someone wants to bleed you guys of knowledge, you're quite happy to share that knowledge?
Yeah, always more than happy to answer people's questions if people put things to you.
Terrific. Okay, what we want to do, we've spent the last couple of hours putting together some data because, as you know, before we talk about the business, we've got to sort of dissect it a little bit. Terang in Western Vic, and you're north of the highway. Last night when I mentioned an 800 mil rainfall, you both looked aghast and went, when was that? And so historically it's been 800, so now we've been sitting on about 600 mil the last 2 or 3 years. And one of the things we want to get from this interview is the season 2018-2019 has been reasonably confronting, but you haven't been in drought. And we'll come back to that question later on because I'm interested to know how you would have reacted had you been in drought. But let's start burrowing into the business for a little while in terms of the physical side of the business and talk about some aspects, because I think you've just done your interims with your accountant and you've made a profit for the year, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So you need to manipulate the business a little bit from a tax point of view. So if we look, what I've got in front of us here is your farm plan, and we milk off, or you milk off, about 257 hectares, correct?
That's right.
Now this type of cow here, Ben, is a black and white cow. So tell us about, just very briefly, about your cow type.
Yeah, well, the herd's, I'd say roughly 75% Frisian with a bit of crossbred through it. In the future we'll continue to go more Frisian. If you have surplus calves, well, there's always an export market there for that. And yeah, fertility's always a focus of ours going forward too, to tighten up calving and get cows in calf. We put cow manger in 2 seasons ago, so that's helping.
Okay. And when we look at about 600 to 630 of these on 257 hectares, that gives us a stocking rate of 2.5 cows per hectare. Now, in this area, how is that regarded? Is that conservative? Is it high? Where do you think that sits?
Yeah, it's definitely on the higher side. I would have said 2 or 3 years ago we were closer to 2, and at that time I thought that's probably a nice fit, but yeah, just through surplus numbers and that, I have just sort of run with the seasons, and the numbers have still stacked up to milk that number. It hasn't really been a focus to get to 2.5 cows to the hectare, but that's just what's happened.
Right, and I think you mentioned that in discussions through the Focus Farm and with other farmers at the end of Focus Farm meetings, that issue of cow numbers would come up a little bit. How did you decide? Where did you pick out this figure of, about 600 cows?
Well, I think with the infrastructure we've had there, it was always over time we'd sneak numbers up a little bit and just see what we could handle. And I wasn't sure whether it was 550 or 600, but as I said, we had more replacements coming through, and with the help of Angus and discussion with other farmers, it did still sort of show out that it wasn't an economical fit for us to milk that number.
You mentioned infrastructure. I didn't ask about the dairy. What's the dairy? How many units and what type of dairy?
60 bale dealer valve rotary, which was built 7 years ago. So it's got everything you need there.
Okay. Now, when we start dissecting your figures, and I look at my little boxes here, which is Anna's pulled out some tissue boxes for us, which is great. When we look at your figures, about 50% of the feed that comes into your system is purchased. So that's my little pink dots here, and here's my pasture down here, and a proportion of the pasture is silage. Now, I asked Ben to do a highly technical pasture growth curve, and that's what you've produced for me, correct?
That's right, Sean.
So Ben, this line here is what? That arrow there is?
That represents start of calving. Our heifers start 1st of April, cows are middle of April.
Okay, and then in the
1st of July.
1st of July, we finished.
All our cows will be calved by then.
Okay. Now, looking at that, what's the reason behind that? Why do you set that setting the way it is?
Well, if I went back 8 to 10 years ago, we were always sort of mid-May, even later, and I just liked the idea of bringing it forward as much for anything to be calving in a bit drier conditions. You get into June, it would get a bit wet and muddy sometimes. It would be more difficult calving, led to more troubles, and I just liked the idea of if you did have to purchase feed in to supplement to produce milk, you were getting paid quite well at that time as well. So it was sort of a bit of a two-way thinking, bring calving forward to suit the dry conditions. Plus, I knew we'd probably at some stage be buying feed in at different times.
Okay, and early in lactation through here, are you feeding much supplement?
Yeah, there's a fair bit fed really up until, nearly August really, before we have much grass most years. 1 in 5 years we might be fortunate to have a bit of grass earlier, but the cows might be only consuming on average somewhere between 3, 4, 5 kilos of grass up until potentially July.
Okay, and so the rest is coming in as pellets and fodder.
That's right.
In the system as we work through.
Yes.
So if I'm a cow in your herd, I'm reasonably comfortable because I've got a fair period of the year on direct grazed grass, which when we look at this, and I'm looking here at a DairyBase report and I'm sort of just flicking through it, this stuff here ends up being, my green bit is about 3 tonne of a 6 tonne intake. So and that's coming in, one chunk's coming in, most of it at $80 to $90 a tonne, and a bit of silage is coming in at $200 a tonne. So even though you're not saying to me that you've set it up to achieve this, by doing this, your intention is, isn't it, to get as much grass in a cow's diet before she dries off?
Yeah, well, we're drying off February, so there's no feed around to feed. Then it's all hand feeding, either pellets or silage. Summer crop, there might be a bit of that still as drying off's happening, but
okay. So to some extent, that's underpinning the cost of feed, and And if we just focus it for another minute in terms of this pasture growth curve, when you get to spring, and I look at the profile of your cows for the year, they're on about 2 tonne of dry matter in pellets, about a tonne of dry matter in hay, and the rest is homegrown pasture and a bit of silage. When you get to spring, do you pull the concentrate right back? Do you pull the pellets right back to very, very low levels? How do you manage the spring, and particularly the spring we've just been through? And I'm going to come back to 18, 19 in a minute. But how do you manage spring?
Yeah, well, I suppose if I think back to 4 or 5 years ago, I would always probably pull the feed back a bit in the bale, but over the last 3 or 4 years, I've generally kept it about the same feed rate, just to keep pushing production from the cows is one part. I suppose it also helps you conserve a bit more silage, which you'll be having to purchase some quality feed in, so you can get a bit more quality silage. That's a bonus too.
Okay, and from some DairyBase figures and some data we looked at, I think the figure was somewhere around about 500 tonnes of dry matter in silage pulled off the 500 to 600 tonnes of dry matter in silage pulled off the milking area last spring.
I think it was 600, yeah.
Yeah, 600.
Yep.
Now, how do you know that? When you say 600, how does Ben know that we've done 600 tonne of dry matter in silage? How do you measure it?
We get charged by a dry tonne.
Yep.
So it's all weighed each load, and dry matter's determined by the feed test, and that's where it's come out at.
Okay, so even though you don't do a heap of number crunching, there are areas where you do want to know a few figures to see what yields have done and what you're being charged and things like that.
Yeah, well, you want to know what you're paying for, plus you want to know how much you have there in your stack at the same time to how far that's going to go.
Okay, so this zone here, we've got pretty cheap feed, and it's about 3 tonne per cow, which at your stocking rate we worked out was about 8.2 tonne per hectare. The one I'm really interested to go to now is this pink area here, because people watching this video are going to be thinking, how did you go in 2018-19? How did you come into that year? How did you plan for it? And let's just context it. You've got a milk price of about $6 a kilo, I think, $6.606, and you're coming into a season where supplement prices look as if they are going to be really challenging. But we've got a reasonable season, correct? We're not in drought, we're not in disaster. How did you approach 2018-19 as you came in? How did you manipulate the business?
Yeah, well, I suppose as it got into spring and the season was looking a bit of a worry up north with grain getting dearer. Fodder, hay was getting dearer. All the talk was a bit concerning there. So there was a lot of inquiries. A lot of phone calls to see what I could source, I suppose, at what I thought was a good price. And I think I done okay there. It was a bit of time and a bit of stress to probably play your cards the right way, I suppose, as far as not committing too early and just holding back and finding the right option at the right time.
So, what's a good price? We've got a $6 milk price. You're going to be buying in fodder, and historically you're buying a bit of cereal hay, maybe a bit of edge hay or whatever. What's a good price, and how did you do that? And what did we buy in?
Well, in the finish I purchased a bit over 500 tonne of average quality, I suppose, medium quality pasture hay and cereal hay, which some of that's been fed to milkers, some to dry cows, some to calves, and also secured about 300 tonne of corn silage, which was a high quality feed for calving cows that we're feeding still now.
Okay. So what sort of money did you pay for your maize silage?
So that was $290 a dry tonne, which compared to other options seemed to be a no-brainer to go down that path at the time.
Okay. And the hay that you negotiated, before you tell us the price, what sort of quality was that?
Yeah, it was just medium quality, about 9 ME. Not high performing milking hay, but it served the purpose as a bit of a split between dry cows, some fed to milkers, some fed to calves, and probably took a bit of a drop in quality of purchased feed than previous years to get what I thought was a good price.
Okay. Now, again, for that medium quality hay, what did you end up paying?
Oh, I think we worked out last night was just under $200 a tonne.
Right. Now, how did you negotiate when the rest of the world's out there paying $300 to $400 a tonne for cereal hay? How did Ben and Anna get it for just under $200?
I think like I said, it's phone calls, inquiries. You like to stick to who you've got it off in the past, but if they're asking for pretty ridiculous prices, you've got to look around, and I think we
You were patient.
probably patient and got a bit lucky too, I suppose. The right person at the right time, and
Lucky.
you can't listen or hear too many things.
Yeah. Okay. So if I'm picturing what the cows have had eaten this year, we've got a base of high quality pasture. Tick that box. The next layer is a base of slightly mediocre fibre, because you pushed it out to 9 megs. When we were talking about it last night, it was 8.7, right? So we're a bit mediocre on the fibre side. Tell us about what comes in on top of that, the pellet story. Now, you actually feed pellets?
Yeah, we've always fed pellets from Ridley, and
Yep.
yeah, we generally feed a higher end pellet most of the time. At the minute, with fresh cows calving, it's 18% protein and just a tick under 13 energy. So yeah, cows perform well, and feeding 7 or 8 kilos of that in the bale at the minute, they'll milk quite well with a bit of a mix of lower quality hay in there and corn silage and a little bit of grass.
Okay. And when we looked at the average price you paid for pellets last year or through this year, I think we came up with something like $460 or $463 a tonne or something, which is well above what you would normally pay. What would be a normal price you would pay for pellets?
I'd say it would be an extra $80 to $100 on a normal season average.
Okay. Now, when we looked at the cost of a tonne of dry matter coming into this farm, this pink stuff here, it seemed as if you've blended mediocre with high quality. You've got the mediocre at a cheap price. You've paid reasonably for the higher quality. That averaged out, I think, at about $414 a tonne dry matter, correct?
Yes.
And we had a $6 milk price.
Yep.
And you've fed cows pretty well, because the cows, I think, produce about 560 solids, and that's been a pretty consistent sort of zone that you've sat in for a few years.
Yeah, I think the solids are a little bit higher.
A little bit higher. Yeah, okay, a little bit higher. Now, the discussion about the 2018-2019 season's been great, but I've been focusing almost entirely here, which is pasture and feed, and sure, that really has a big impact on profit, and my impression is you've created a really good margin over and above the feed costs on the farm. But the other thing I noticed about the Kenna dairy operation is you hold that margin by keeping overheads low. Now, repairs and maintenance, for example, seems to be very low, and labour costs are quite low. Now, do you want to comment on those, Anna? How do you, well, both of you, how do you keep particularly repairs and maintenance and some of those other costs quite low?
Well, when we bought the farm back 5 or 6 years, we bought it from my parents. We paid market rate for the land and the infrastructure, but we were just very lucky that it was set up so well. Like, it was a nearly new rotary feed pad, everything. So I suppose that has made it very, very labour efficient. Ben was able to design everything how he wanted it to run, the way he likes to run his system. And then repairs and maintenance also, I suppose, as being a new plant, sometimes that can keep those costs down as well. So
Okay. And the labour side, just a quick comment on how do you keep that down at a level that seems to be what a lot of other people can't quite achieve. I suppose the infrastructure is part of it, but staffing wise.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, at carving time when we're a bit busier, we'll often employ an extra person for that 3 months, but other than that, we can generally manage with myself and 2 other workers, and everyone, gets reasonable hours, but they're not overworked either, I don't think, so.
and the feed pad that we've got there makes it very time efficient for feeding out. So you're not in and out of paddocks. So
Okay.
It would be half the time of feeding out silage in paddocks.
Now, I've been watching good asset, highly skilled asset accumulating dairy farmers for years and years, and I'm going to ask you a question. It's a strange question. Do you spend $20 or $30 on gate breaks?
No, John, I've always made my own. I don't know whether it's something I got from my dad, or it probably was, but it seems easy to make them at home, and they're more durable than the ones you purchase anyway.
Right. I don't think I need to say any more about Ben and Anna and their farming characteristics. Thanks very much to Ben and Anna for contributing to the video. Thanks very much for watching. The dairy industry is a tough industry, and if I was a dairy farmer, I'd be trying to watch people like Ben and Anna and work out how they do it and follow them around a fair bit. Thanks very much.